It was supposed to be the happiest night of our lives. Our 6th anniversary, something I had been planning for weeks. I spent hours making sure everything was perfect. The restaurant, the decorations, even the playlist. It wasn't just an anniversary to me. It was a celebration of us, of everything we'd built together. I thought I knew her. Every smile, every glance, every word she spoke. I thought I could read her like a book, chapter after chapter, without a single page missing. That night, I realized how wrong I was. When I walked into that room and saw her waiting for me, I couldn't help but smile. She looked stunning, radiant even. And for a moment, I felt lucky. Lucky to have someone like Anna by my side. My friends used to joke that I was the guy who'd hit the jackpot, and I believed it. But as the night unfolded, there were moments, small moments, that didn't sit right. Moments I tried to ignore. The way she kept checking her phone. The way she laughed just a little too hard at a joke I didn't hear. The way her eyes lit up when someone else walked into the room. That someone was Michael, her first love. I'd heard his name before, in passing, like an old song you barely remember the lyrics to. I'd never met him, never thought I'd have to. But there he was, walking into our anniversary dinner like he belonged there. I tried to push the thought away, to tell myself it didn't matter, that this was my night, our night. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized something was happening right in front of me, something I couldn't ignore. And when it finally happened, when she kissed him, right there in front of everyone, I knew everything was about to change. That night, I made a decision that would set everything in motion, a decision I'll never forget. And by the end of this story, neither will you. Before we continue, a quick reminder. Over 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed to this channel yet. Your support means everything to us. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Let me take you back to the beginning, before everything fell apart, when it was just me and Anna against the world. I met Anna 6 years ago. It was one of those moments you don't forget. One of those moments you don't want to forget. I remember the first time I saw her. She was standing by the coffee counter, arguing with the barista over something silly, like the wrong size cup. She had this energy about her, this spark. She was fiery, bold, and unapologetically herself. I knew I had to talk to her. It didn't take much convincing. We hit it off immediately. We spent hours that day, talking about everything and nothing all at once. By the end of it, I felt like I'd known her forever. She wasn't just beautiful. She was the kind of person who lit up a room without even trying. She made me laugh like no one else could. And when she smiled at me, it was like the rest of the world didn't matter. I knew I was in trouble, and I didn't care. Over the years, we built something incredible. Anna wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything. We traveled together, celebrated every little victory, and supported each other through the tough times. I remember the way she held my hand the night I got laid off. She didn't let me sulk, didn't let me lose hope. She looked me in the eyes and said, "We'll get through this, together." And we did. Our anniversary wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was a reminder of everything we'd overcome, of everything we had to look forward to. I always went all out for her on that day, because she deserved it. And this year was no different. I planned everything down to the last detail. A private dinner at her favorite restaurant. Her favorite wine. A gift I knew would make her smile. Anna had this way of making me feel like the luckiest man alive. Our friends used to joke about how whipped I was. They said I'd do anything for her, and they weren't wrong. I loved her, plain and simple. And for a long time, I thought she loved me just as much. That night, as I stood in front of the mirror fixing my tie, I remember thinking how far we'd come, how much we'd been through, and how, no matter what, we always found our way back to each other. I felt proud, grateful, excited to see the look on her face when she saw everything I'd planned. But looking back now, there were things I didn't notice, things I didn't want to notice. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes the way it used to. The way she seemed distant sometimes, like she was somewhere else entirely. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just my imagination. After all, we were happy, weren't we? I didn't know it then, but that night would change everything. The life I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved, it would all come crashing down before my eyes. But before we get to that, let me tell you a little more about Anna. About the woman I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. Because to understand what happened that night, you have to understand her. The good, the bad, and everything in between. Anna had this way of drawing people in. She could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. She was smart, funny, and had a laugh that could make even the worst day feel better. She was the kind of person you couldn't help but love, and I loved her more than I ever thought I could love anyone. I thought we had it all. A love that people envied. A future that seemed so certain. And for years, I believed that. I held on to it with everything I had. Because when you find someone like Anna, you don't let go. You don't give up. But sometimes, the person you think you know best turns out to be a stranger. And sometimes, the love you thought would last forever doesn't. That night was supposed to be a celebration of us, of everything we'd built. But instead, it became the beginning of the end. I remember walking into the restaurant, holding the bouquet of roses I'd picked out earlier that day. Anna loved roses, red, full, with a faint hint of dew on the petals. I made sure they were perfect, just like I thought our night would be. The place was already buzzing when I arrived. Our closest friends were seated around a long table, chatting and laughing. Anna was at the center of it all, like she always was. She had this way of commanding attention, effortlessly. And when she saw me walk in, she stood up and smiled. It was the kind of smile that should have made me feel warm inside. But it didn't. There was something off about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I brushed it aside, told myself I was imagining things. After all, this was Anna. My Anna. Why would I think otherwise? As I made my way to the table, she walked up to me and kissed my cheek. It was quick, almost rushed. And then, just like that, she was gone, back to the center of attention, laughing with everyone else. I stood there for a moment, holding the roses, wondering if she'd even noticed them. I sat down beside her, trying to shake the feeling. The conversation flowed easily around me, but I couldn't focus. Something about the way Anna was acting didn't sit right. She was distracted, her attention flitting around the room like she was waiting for something, or someone. And then he walked in. Michael. I didn't know him at first. I'd never met him before, but I'd heard about him. Anna's first love. The one she said she'd left in the past. The one she promised didn't matter anymore. And yet, here he was, walking into our anniversary dinner like he belonged there. He spotted Anna immediately, and her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She got up, walked toward him, and hugged him, right in front of me. It wasn't the kind of hug you'd give an old friend. It lingered. It meant something. I tried to play it cool, to convince myself it didn't mean anything. But as the night went on, it became impossible to ignore. The way she leaned into him when she laughed. The way their conversations seemed to exist in their own world, leaving the rest of us as spectators. The way her hand brushed his arm more times than I could count. I wanted to say something. I wanted to stand up and demand an explanation. But every time I tried, I stopped myself. I didn't want to ruin the night. I didn't want to look insecure or paranoid. So I sat there, forcing a smile, pretending everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. It became painfully clear when the toast started. Each of our friends stood up, one by one, saying something nice about us, about our relationship. And every time they did, I felt Anna pull further away from me. She barely looked at me, barely acknowledged the words being said. And then it happened. Michael stood up. He raised his glass and started talking about their past, about how they used to dream of traveling the world together, about how Anna was the most incredible woman he'd ever known. He said it with no hesitation, no shame, as if I wasn't sitting right there. I looked at Anna, expecting her to laugh it off, to dismiss it, but she didn't. She smiled. She blushed. And then, as if the knife in my back wasn't deep enough, she leaned over and kissed him. Not on the cheek, not a friendly gesture. A kiss. A real kiss. Right there. In front of me, in front of everyone. For a second, I thought I must be imagining it. That there was no way she'd do this. Not here. Not now. But the look on their faces, the whispers around the table, it was all real. I stood up. I couldn't sit there any longer. I didn't say a word. I just walked out. I could hear Anna calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My chest felt tight. My head was spinning. The night I had spent weeks planning had turned into a nightmare in a matter of seconds. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap to the face. And that's when it started to sink in. The betrayal, the humiliation, the realization that the woman I had given everything to didn't care. Not about me. Not about us. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, replaying everything in my head. The signs I'd missed, the moments I'd ignored. And as I sat there, one thought consumed me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What happened next? Let's just say, they both learned what it means to regret. I drove home that night in complete silence. No music, no radio. Just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. I couldn't think straight. My mind was racing, bouncing between disbelief and anger. How could she do this to me? How could she humiliate me like that, in front of everyone? But the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. The late-night phone calls she said were with her sister. The sudden excuses to stay late at work. The way she'd pull away whenever I tried to hold her. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the anger had taken over. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't confused. I was furious. I wanted answers. I wanted her to explain how she could throw away everything we had for him. But when I walked through the door, the house was empty. Silent. She wasn't there. Of course, she wasn't there. She was probably still with him, laughing about what had happened, about how pathetic I must have looked walking out like that. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Her smile, his smug face, the kiss. Over and over, like a loop I couldn't escape. By the time the sun came up, I wasn't just angry. I was determined. Determined to make sure neither of them forgot what they'd done. The first thing I did was gather every piece of evidence I could find. Texts, emails, photos, anything that could prove what was going on between them. I needed to know how long it had been happening, how deep it went, and the more I uncovered, the worse it got. It wasn't just one kiss. It wasn't just one night. They'd been seeing each other for months. Behind my back, lying to my face. Every time she told me she loved me, every time she kissed me goodnight, it was all a lie. I should have felt devastated, crushed, but I didn't. All I felt was rage. Pure, blinding rage. They didn't just betray me, they made a fool out of me. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I started small. Anonymous messages, cryptic texts, things to make them paranoid. I wanted them to feel the same unease I'd felt, the same doubt and confusion. I wanted them to look over their shoulders, wondering who was watching, who knew. But that wasn't enough. Not for what they did. So, I decided to hit them where it hurt most. Michael had secrets, big ones. Secrets he'd worked hard to keep buried. But when you're angry enough, determined enough, you can find out just about anything. And I found everything. His debts, his shady business deals, the skeletons in his closet he thought no one would ever find. I started leaking pieces of information, little by little, just enough to cause problems. His business partners stopped returning his calls. His clients started pulling out of deals. And then, when he was on the verge of losing everything, I sent it all to his wife. Yeah, he had a wife. A wife who had no idea what he'd been doing behind her back. When she found out, she didn't just leave him. She exposed him. To everyone. His friends, his family, his colleagues. Overnight, Michael went from being the golden boy to being a disgrace. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. As for Anna, I made sure her world came crashing down too. I didn't want her to just lose Michael. I wanted her to lose everything. The friends she'd lied to, the reputation she'd built, the life she thought she could keep. I made sure everyone knew the truth about her, about who she really was. At first, she tried to fight back. She called me, begged me to stop. She said she was sorry, that she made a mistake. But it was too late for that. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal. Sorry doesn't undo the damage. Looking back, I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that I didn't see it coming, that I trusted her, believed in her, even when I shouldn't have. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. They thought they could walk all over me, that I'd just roll over and take it. They were wrong. By the time I realized how deep their betrayal ran, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about getting even. It wasn't about shouting or arguing or begging for answers. No, this was about making them feel what I felt, betrayed, humiliated, powerless. But I wasn't going to rush. Revenge is best served carefully, methodically. And I had time. I started with Anna. I knew her better than anyone. Her habits, her patterns, her weaknesses. She had always prided herself on her social circle, the network of people who admired her, envied her. Her reputation was everything. So, I decided to take it away. I started reaching out to her friends, planting seeds of doubt. Little things at first, innocent-sounding questions that made them wonder if they really knew her. Have you ever noticed how secretive Anna is? Did she tell you she was working late last week? Because I know for a fact she wasn't. It didn't take long for those questions to snowball into full-blown suspicions. But that was just the beginning. I had access to her phone, her emails, her social media. I knew the passwords she thought I didn't remember. And with every message, every photo, I found more ammunition, more proof of her lies, her manipulations, her betrayal. I didn't just confront her with it. I made sure everyone saw it. Her closest friends, her family, her colleagues. I forwarded emails, sent screenshots, shared the truth she'd worked so hard to hide. The fallout was immediate. People stopped answering her calls. Invitations dried up. The woman who once thrived on attention suddenly found herself alone. And then there was Michael. Taking him down wasn't as simple. It required more planning, more precision. He wasn't just some guy. He had a reputation to protect, a business to run. But that also meant he had more to lose. And I was more than willing to help him lose it. I started following the breadcrumbs. Late-night meetings, unrecorded transactions, favors owed to the wrong people. Michael wasn't just unfaithful, he was reckless. And I used that recklessness against him. I reached out to one of his business partners, an older man named Carl. Carl had been wary of Michael for a while, but he didn't have the proof to act on it. Until I handed it to him. Bank statements, emails, photos. Carl didn't ask where I got them. He didn't need to. All he needed was an excuse to pull out of their biggest deal. And I gave it to him. Within weeks, Michael's business started crumbling. Contracts were canceled. Investors backed out. And the people he thought were loyal? They turned on him the moment they realized he couldn't deliver. It was almost too easy. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Michael thought he could just walk away, start fresh somewhere else. So, I made sure that wasn't an option. I leaked everything. His shady deals, his debts, his infidelity. I didn't just ruin his reputation. I destroyed it. By the time I was done, there wasn't a single door left open for him. And Anna? She didn't escape unscathed either. She tried to apologize, to explain, but I wasn't interested. I made sure her life was just as empty as the promises she'd made to me. Her friends, her career, her carefully curated image. It all fell apart. And I didn't lift a finger to stop it. I remember the last time I saw her. She showed up at my door, tears in her eyes, begging for forgiveness. She said she made a mistake, that she still loved me, that we could fix it. But all I saw was the woman who kissed another man in front of me. The woman who lied to me, betrayed me, humiliated me. And I told her exactly that. You made your choice, Anna. Now you have to live with it. And then I closed the door. I didn't look back. Not then. Not ever. As for Michael, he disappeared not long after. Rumor has it he moved to another city, trying to rebuild his life. But I know better. Men like him don't rebuild. They just find new ways to ruin everything around them. And if he ever thought about coming back, he'd know better than to cross me again. Revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure they never forget. And believe me, they won't. After everything I'd done to dismantle their lives, I should have felt satisfied. I should have been able to move on, to let it go. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their laughter, that kiss. And every time I saw it, the anger burned brighter, hotter, refusing to be extinguished. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Not for what they did. Words, rumors, and public humiliation were one thing. But they needed to feel it, to truly feel the pain they caused. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. I started watching them. Not in a desperate or obsessive way, no. This was different. This was tactical. I learned their routines, their habits, where they went, who they met. Michael had taken a job at a small, struggling company in the outskirts of town. Anna was working freelance, bouncing between coffee shops and the occasional client meeting. They were trying to rebuild, to pick up the pieces of the lives I'd shattered. But I wasn't going to let that happen. It started with Michael. Late one night, after he'd spent hours drinking at a bar downtown, I followed him. He didn't notice me. He was too busy stumbling down the dimly lit streets, muttering to himself. I waited until he turned down an alleyway, a shortcut he probably thought would get him home faster. And that's when I confronted him. I didn't say a word at first, just stood there, watching him, letting him realize he wasn't alone. When he finally noticed me, his face turned pale. He tried to laugh it off, to act like he wasn't scared, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew. He knew exactly why I was there. I didn't give him a chance to talk. I didn't want excuses or apologies. I wanted him to feel what I felt that night. Helpless, humiliated, broken. And when my fist connected with his jaw, when he hit the ground with a thud, I knew I was just getting started. I didn't stop. Not when he begged. Not when he tried to crawl away. Not when he promised he'd leave and never come back. I wanted him to remember this moment for the rest of his life. And he will. Every time he looks in the mirror, every time he feels the ache in his ribs, he'll remember. When I finally walked away, leaving him lying there in the dirt, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt justice. And for the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. But Michael wasn't the only one who needed to learn a lesson. Anna wasn't going to get off that easily. She was harder to corner, more cautious after everything that had happened. But I was patient. I waited for the right moment, the right opportunity. And when it came, I didn't hesitate. It was late, past midnight, when I showed up at her apartment. She was alone, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She didn't see me at first, didn't even hear me until I was standing right behind her. When she turned around and saw me, the look on her face was priceless. Fear, shock, guilt, all at once. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just told her the truth she'd been avoiding ever since that night. I told her how she ruined us, how she destroyed everything we'd built. And then I told her exactly what was going to happen next. You don't get to move on, I said. You don't get to pretend this never happened. You took everything from me, and now I'm taking everything from you. I didn't lay a hand on her. I didn't need to. The fear in her eyes was enough. She knew what I was capable of. She knew what I'd already done to Michael. And when I walked out of that apartment, leaving her shaking, I knew I'd won. Revenge isn't just about the act itself. It's about the aftermath, the scars it leaves behind, the lessons it teaches. And when it was all said and done, I didn't just get my revenge. I took back my power. Some people might say I went too far, that I let my anger control me. But they weren't there. They didn't feel the pain I felt, the betrayal, the humiliation. They don't get to judge me. Because in the end, they got what they deserved. And I got my closure. But closure doesn't come without a cost. The days that followed weren't what I expected. At first, there was a sense of satisfaction, a feeling that I'd set things right, that they'd learned their lesson, that justice had been served. But as the days turned into weeks, something else crept in. Silence, stillness, and with it, the question I'd been avoiding. What comes next? For so long, my life had been consumed by anger, by a need for revenge. Every thought, every action, every decision, it all led back to them, to Anna, to Michael. And when it was over, when there was nothing left to do, I realized I was standing in the ruins of my own life. I wasn't the same person I was before. The person who planned anniversaries with roses and candlelight. The person who believed in love, in trust, in forever. That version of me was gone, and in its place was someone I barely recognized. Someone harder, colder. Someone who had learned the price of betrayal and the cost of vengeance. I tried to go back to normal, to rebuild, to move forward. But it wasn't that simple. People talk. They always do. Friends who once looked up to me, who envied my relationship, now avoided me. Some said I'd gone too far. Others didn't say anything at all. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. But they didn't know the whole story. They didn't feel the betrayal, the humiliation, the pain. They didn't know what it was like to have everything ripped away in an instant. So, I stopped caring what they thought. I stopped explaining myself. The only thing that mattered was that I did what I had to do. And yet, there were moments, late at night, when I'd sit alone in the quiet and wonder, was it worth it? Was the revenge, the satisfaction, the power, was it enough? Did it fill the void they left behind? Or did it just create a new one? Because the truth is, revenge doesn't heal wounds. It doesn't erase the pain or bring back what you lost. It just shifts the weight from one side to the other, leaving you to carry it in a different way. I still think about them sometimes. Not often, but enough. Michael moved away, I heard. Somewhere far, somewhere quiet. A place where no one knows his name, where he can start over. But starting over doesn't erase the past. And no matter where he goes, he'll always carry the scars of what happened. Scars I gave him. And Anna, I haven't seen her since that night at her apartment. I heard she left the city, lost her job, her friends, everything she thought made her who she was. I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she ever wonders what could have been, if she regrets the choices she made. But I don't dwell on it. I can't, because at the end of the day, their choices led them here. And mine brought me peace, or at least something close to it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that trust is fragile. It takes years to build, but only seconds to shatter. And once it's broken, no amount of apologies, no amount of promises can ever put it back together the way it was. Would I do it all over again? Would I take the same steps, make the same choices, deliver the same consequences? I don't know. Part of me says yes, without hesitation. The other part, well, the other part knows that revenge doesn't just change the people you aim it at. It changes you too. But if there's one thing I do know, it's this. I'm not the person I was before. And maybe that's a good thing. Because the person I was, he let people walk all over him. He trusted too easily, forgave too quickly. He was weak. And weakness is dangerous. So, if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Trust wisely. Love carefully. And if someone betrays you, don't just walk away. Make sure they remember. Because in the end, it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power. And sometimes, that's the only way to truly move on. Thank you for listening to Wild Love Story. If this tale resonated with you, or if you've ever faced betrayal, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next story, you won't want to miss it.